So, Luciano, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Vittorio. It's for me a great pleasure and the honor to be here with this honorable guests, and we are very proud as part of this university of your presence, and we wish all of you great success and a lot of fun, I hope. So just to testify that my admiration for Japanese technology and industry is not a formality, I can tell you that I had 3 or 4 big motorbikes from Japan, Honda, Yamaha, Suzuki and others, and at the moment my 2 cars are 2 Honda. You see, so you cannot doubt about this. If you want, I can show you in the parking lot. Having said this, so we are on the true side. I tell you something that started by accident a few years ago. I mean, I read a paper that attracted my attention, and I gave a thesis to Andrea Tachella, who is here in the audience and is one of the authors. And in 5-6 years, this developed into quite a big project. As you see, many people, and there are even a little more people. And we had a lot of support from Sapienza, from Europe, from etc. And very recently, in the last 2 years, from the World Bank. So the World Bank, which is one of the established institutions, mainstream institution, has adopted our methodology. So the blue names that you see in this list are our friend scientists from World Bank with whom we collaborate now daily. And so the World Bank now has our methodology officially adopted. But I give you only some snapshots. No, it's not a formal talk, it's just 3 or 4 take-home messages. So this is called economic fitness and complexity. We want to talk about economic growth. We have seen in the previous beautiful lecture, you know, a lot of poor countries, Africa and so on. So that's one of basic problems in the world today. Can Africa or can poor country develop? How can they develop? What is reasonable? What is useful? You know, when the people talk about development, they talk about money. But money and finance are not the key for development. The key for development is engineering and industry and ideas and products and economics in this sense. So we would like not to talk about financial crisis, as most physicists to try, which is an interesting subject, but we want to talk about the complementary thing, how things grow. People may think that things grow in an easy way. You put a brick on top of the other. But that's not so simple. As you see in this snapshot, this is Shanghai in 1990 and Shanghai after 20 years. Now, Brazil was similar in 1990 than China, actually even better, and now China is almost like US and Brazil is more or less where it was. So prediction of growth is far from trivial. It may appear simple because it is not as abrupt as a crisis, but it's very difficult to design the criteria for growth and development. This is the task we try to do something. So just to show you that there are big problems, I show you the percentage of GDP growth of China. As you see, these red lines are all above 5%. Sometimes they reach 15% of the past 25 years. And on the right, you see the opinion of the mainstream institutions, you know. So they are talking about hard landing since 1990 to 2017. Actually, the beginning of these statistics is 1980, which is the first time I went to China. And believe me, in 1980, China was unbelievable with respect to today. There was not a single car in Beijing. And so you can, I mean, it's impossible to imagine. So for me, China was a fantastic example that shows also how the state, action and the private industry mixed together can make really miracles. In any case, given this situation, I would say that there is a big problem with the analysis of growth, because, you know, this, we are all wrong. I could add many more. I have just added a few, I mean, for your information. So we thought, how are these analyses made? These analyses are made by adding up hundreds of data, you know, all together. So the idea is, what's wrong with this analysis? Maybe we should add, instead of 100, we should add thousands of data or billions of data. Well, we thought that's not the right path. We thought we should add one data and not 100. Why? Well, more general question. This is the first take-home message. If you have more data, if you have some data and I add some more data, are you sure you are going to make the analysis better? Okay, this is the fundamental question I would like you to think 1 minute with me. What happens if you have one more data? Well, you have more information, but the problem is that you have to add to the other ones, you see, because in the end you want one number, you want the GDP growth, which is one number. So, and this data have to do with everything, with the, transportation, with education, with pollution. So, it's unavoidable that you are going to add apples with bananas, which is what we were taught at the elementary school that you shouldn't do. So when you do it, because you are forced to do, you introduce mathematically noise. And then, so when you have one more data, the question you have to ask is the signal that I have more with the new data somehow positive or negative with respect to the noise that this data will introduce in my story? We believe this is a basic fundamental problem of the standard analysis. So we decided to go to zero noise, namely take just one optimal set of data and don't mix it with anything, not because you don't want to have the other data, but because you want to avoid the noise problem. So our strategic, radically different picture is we take the best data you have and only that. So it's a limitation. After we use all the data, but we use them in a hierarchical way. So for example, for economic fitness, which is our competitiveness parameter, we take essentially the export data, not because we make a statistics of export, but because we use the export as a proxy of your capabilities. You see, that's the idea. For technological fitness, we use the patent data, and for scientific fitness, we use the papers, the scientific articles, and so on. But for the moment, let's just talk about economic fitness. So when you look at what countries do, you see this diagram, this triangular diagram. There are in the vertical axis there are countries, on the horizontal there are products. So top countries are on top, and good products are on the right. Good, I mean highly technological. As you see, it's triangular structure, so this means that countries who do very sophisticated stuff, they also do intermediate and relatively low quality. Now this reminds of biology. Ecosystems have to be diversified, and this seems to be a fundamental factor just inspecting the data. So we started from this intuition, this observation, we added a little bit of intuition, and in the end we would like to go from qualitative to quantitative measures. So from this data, who produces what, who exports what, we want to derive with an algorithm the competitiveness of countries, which we call fitness, and the complexity of products, which we call complexity. I have no time to tell you what are the merits of this algorithm, but this is the one that has been chosen by the World Bank compared to many others. So somehow I will be glad in private or when you want to tell you a lot more. But so basically out of this, so this is inspired to Google in the sense that the important element is in the link and not on the site, but it is different from Google. And this means that big data, in our view, will be structured in different domains in which you have to select data. So big data starts from small data, and that's the others hierarchically. And for each problem, as in physics, for each problem you have to have a theory, and here for each problem you have to have an algorithm. And I wrote there is life after Google, in the sense that Google is not the only algorithm. This is different from Google, and for economics this works much better. Now, what is the result? For example, the result is that you get something alternative to money, to GDP. You get the fitness. So this is the example of the BRIC countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China, which Goldman Sachs decided that they would dominate the world economy for 50 years. This decision was taken in 2001, and they made a special fund. As you see on the right bottom, this fund collapsed a couple of years ago. So this means there was something wrong with this idea and with this decision. On the right, you see the fitness instead of GDP. That gives you a totally different perspective. So China is very good, is even better in fitness than in money, than in GDP. India is medium good, but Brazil and Russia are much lower, and they are going down. So the the intrinsic industrial competitiveness of this country is very different and their trend is very different. So the unification into an acronym, in our opinion, was a mistake. Today, people agree with our view, but as you see from the dashed line on the right, our view would have given this message already 10 years ago. Now, this gives you something very interesting that, the question is, are we doing something really new, or are we just finding what the others find with their own methods? This is what a lot of people ask me, especially from finance. Now, these two graphs show that in this case, at least we are doing something definitely new with respect to the Goldman Sachs analyst. So there is a new information that arises from this. But let's look at the whole world. You see, this is a graph, GDP versus fitness. And you can see the red line is a sort of average. As you see from the arrow, China was a strong, we are in 95, was a strong outlier. So it had a very large fitness and very low GDP. So the expectation is that this is a candidate for fast growth. As you see, that's what it did. Okay, the rest is difficult to see with the eye, so I do something like coarse graining. I make the average of the trajectory in each little box, and then a pattern emerges. It emerges a pattern in which the green zone is like laminar, it's regular, like steady wind, and the red zone is like turbulent. Now this gives a completely new way of doing economic forecasting, because this is done in this new space, GDP fitness, and is done with the methods of statistical physics and dynamical system, and not just with the standard regressions. This method we developed in great detail, and it beat the standard IMF methodologies, which is the official forecasting, by 20 to 30%, depends where you do. So this gave us some popularity. As you see, this is a Bloomberg report of a few months ago. So it says the fitness technique systematically outperforms standard methods despite requiring much less data. If we go back to China, why we can say that China somehow we can explain the China mystery, because as you see, China had tremendously large fitness and it had a low GDP. So we could forecast that since China is here, you see, since the position was this, it was natural that it should go up for a long time, and our forecast now is that it will go on still for a while. I'm going to conclude. So I think I gave you an idea. What else can we do? This is all the stuff. We can look into the specific structure of this data to construct the relation between products. From this relation between products and suitable machine learning, we can predict what a country will be able to make, not by looking at the time series, but by looking at the set of products it already makes and compare with what the others did with similar products. So, for example, this is a specific question. We are in 2003, and we ask, will Latvia become competitive in plastic tubes? As you see, in the left, Latvia doesn't do almost nothing in the plastic tube, but since we know all the other products, we can use the machine learning, and indeed, the Latvia did, after a few years, the plastic tube. So this is one of the most sophisticated things we can do, and you can imagine it's very important for finance, for planning, policy making, and so on. We can do more. We can look at a big network where you have science, technology, and products, and then look at each layer and the interconnection. And then you can ask questions like which technologies you need to make lithium-ion batteries, or you can ask the complementary question, if you have a good people in astrophysics, which type of spin-off will come out in terms of patents? Finally, let me make a sort of moral, ethical concept. So is really basic science the start of everything, as many claim, and of course we would like? Then, so if you have basic science plus technology plus innovation, is this the economic development? It's not so simple. Because in the 60s, Chile and South Korea were similar in science and in innovation. But in 2014, South Korea is among the industrial countries and China is not. So the idea is that there is not one secret, but you need an integrated structure. And this is what we call economic fitness and complexity. Thank you very much.